Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third live stream in our Facebook Live Lunch and Learn series. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and in recognition of that and our statewide stay-at-home order, which for some expires today, we've been bringing you live content online all throughout the month. So today's Lunch and Learn is all about anxiety, and joining us today is John Hershfield, Director of the OCD and Anxiety Center here at Sheppard Pratt. Before I turn it over to John, I wanted to go through a few quick housekeeping items. So first of all, as a reminder, information shared in this live stream should not be taken as personal medical advice or consultation and should not be used as a diagnosis or in place of a visit or consultation with a mental health care provider. And second, we've got about 30 minutes together today. We will be leaving time for Q&A at the end as always, so please leave your questions for John in the comments and we will get to as many as time allows. And with that, I am going to turn it over to John. So John, take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Hershfield. Thanks for having lunch with me today. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get into this. Let's see. Having a little bit of a problem sharing my screen right now. It's saying host disabled participant screen sharing. Christina?
One sec, John, I'm working on it.
Thank you. So this is good exposure to anxiety, and I hope I'm modeling it well for you. There we go. And sharing my screen now. And I'm going to set this up here. To show the slides. It's not letting me go into full slide mode. 1 second, slideshow. Okay, there it is. All right. So thank you for joining me. And I'm here to talk to you about understanding and managing anxiety. My name is John Hershfield. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and director of the OCD and Anxiety Center at Sheppard Pratt. We're a bit of a new feature at Sheppard, and we're very happy to be a part of this family. So let's talk about what anxiety actually is, just to get us started. So often it gets confused with fear because it feels very similar in the body, but fear is a stress response that we have to a specific or immediate threat. So let's say you're taking a walk and you see a dog that's not on a leash and it's barking and it's coming towards you. You're going to feel afraid for your safety, and your body's going to start preparing itself so that you can defend yourself from this immediate threat. And there are varying degrees of how close the threat would be, but the threat is specific and targeted. Anxiety is this same experience that we have, but it's in response to an uncertain or abstract future threat. And it's something that's typically out of proportion to the impact that the threat would actually have. Meaning if the fear were to come true, we'd probably handle it a little bit better than we imagined that we would, but we become so anxious, so wrapped up in needing to be certain that it won't come true, that our body starts to elicit this fear response. And it's often generated by a what if thought. So, what if something bad happens in the future? So instead of it being, there's a dog that's growling and barking and it's going to hurt me, it's, what if there's a dog out here somewhere? I don't see any dogs, but I'm afraid, I'm concerned about going outside because there could be a dog. And what if I don't handle that situation well? So it's all about those what if thoughts. So what are some of the common symptoms of anxiety? Well, the first one is what I'm experiencing right now, trying to get this technology to work right, which is increased heart rate. So I can feel it going boom, 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 boom. I'm also really excited to be here. So it's sort of hard to tell the difference between being anxious and being excited. So increased heart rate is a really useful thing if you are under attack. This is your brain's way of basically prepping the body for you to fight or flee or freeze. And so if you are in danger, you want an increased heart rate for energy. Similarly, short and rapid breathing is something a lot of people experience with anxiety. And when you're breathing like that, you're fuel injecting oxygen to the brain at a rate that's making you more alert and more prepared. Tense muscles, obviously, that would be useful if you're preparing to fight or run. Restlessness, right? You don't want to be relaxed when you're in a threatening situation. You want to be ready to go, ready to run. And an interesting thing also happens in the mind, where when you're anxious, you become hyper-focused on the imagined threat. So you might just keep noticing that your mind just keeps bringing it up. What about this? What about this? What about this? Which again would be useful if you were in danger. You wouldn't want to forget that you were in danger. But simultaneously, while you have this singular focus, there's also this situation of racing thoughts, because your brain in the background is trying to figure out all the strategies to keep you safe. Where are the exits? What are the defense strategies? So it's this interesting and very often overwhelming experience in the mind of focusing on something and also having racing thoughts. So the thing about all of these symptoms, although they can be quite unpleasant, and even more unpleasant when they're happening in an environment where there is no discernible threat, is that they're all really good ideas if you're under attack. It's all your body's natural way and your brain's natural way of preparing you and protecting you. It's just that sometimes it misfires or essentially overdoes it. So who gets anxiety? And the answer is everyone. We all get anxiety. It is a natural, normal thing to experience. And we experience it in many different ways. And before, in that list of all the different ways it expresses itself in the mind and body, not everyone experiences it exactly the same way. So I meet people all the time who mostly experience it in the mind, but not so much in the body, or people who only experience it as muscle tension, but they don't seem to have all the other symptoms. And that's okay. That doesn't mean it's not anxiety. It just means different people have different ways of expressing it. So there are several conditions where anxiety is one of the primary features or a significant feature. And you don't have to have a mental health diagnosis to struggle with anxiety. And certainly now, and I'm going to talk a little bit soon about COVID, we're all dealing with more anxiety and uncertainty than we were used to. But there are some mental health conditions that are diagnosable and treatable where anxiety is a feature. So the first, of course, being generalized anxiety disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder also often involves anxiety and other forms of distress, disgust, and things like that. PTSD, BDD, panic disorder, social phobia, and specific phobias. They're all at least have some feature there where your body is responding to a threat in an overly pronounced way. And you have strategies for addressing it that might be over the top or might be ineffective at least. And that's the disordered part comes from it taking up more time and more joy out of life than it should. So here we are living through the COVID-19 pandemic. And normally you would be maybe coming to a talk like this in person, and we're doing it online because we're all making these adjustments. So we know that anxiety and OCD and similar conditions, they're often driven by an intolerance of uncertainty. In fact, I often tell my clients that an obsession is simply a thing that you're not accepting uncertainty about. So a person might say, well, here's a scary idea, and I really hope it doesn't happen, but I can't predict the future, and who knows? And another person might have the same scary idea and say, I cannot accept that as a possibility. I must do something about it to protect myself. So COVID-19 is really doing this to all of us right now, where there's uncertainty about sort of how the virus works and what it does to people when you get it, and how long we're going to be doing the stay-at-home thing. And okay, some of us are opening up the stores a little bit more now, but how's that going to work, and how long is it going to work? When are the kids going to go back to school, and what's school going to look like then? And I'm probably making you anxious by rattling off this list, so I'll stop. But I think we all need to understand that this increase in anxiety is normal. And if you already struggle with an anxiety-based disorder, well, it might be even more pronounced. So there are some things you could do that might help you navigate it a little bit better, I think. So the first thing that comes to mind is to pick a level of news and social media intake that's healthy for you. So there's a lot of really good information out there on the internet, good blogs and things like that about limiting your news and social media intake. But I think it's a little bit more complex than limiting it. What you really want to do is figure out what's healthy and nourishing for you. So for me, it wouldn't work for me to not take in any news or any social media, because there's an amount of news and social media that helps me feel connected and competent and informed. And then on the social media front, I'm connecting with my friends. But then there's a critical mass above which it starts to turn toxic, and there's too much news in your head, and there's too much to worry about, and there's too many things being posted and too much clicking going on. So really try to find something, ask yourself, is this helpful for me, or am I just doing it out of habit or fear? And then see if you can set it up so that you get the amount that you need, and you kind of hold yourself to those parameters. Speaking of what's healthy for you, physical exercise, healthy eating, we know all of these things can help reduce anxiety, can help you balance out anxiety. I would strongly recommend that you develop and commit to a mindful meditation practice. 2 Lunch and Learns ago, there was a wonderful talk by Dr. Gottlieb on mindfulness, and put simply, that is the antidote to being lost in the stories in your head about the future and about all of the what ifs. So learning to sort of catch yourself lost in those narratives and then come back to the here and now, that is the best way that I know to really address anxiety. And along those same lines, try to engage in activities that really ground you to the here and now. So there's certainly nothing wrong with kind of checking out and playing video games and things like that. But even with those, try to really pay attention to what you're doing, really show up to them. And other things that ground you to the here and now, like listening to music, but really experiment with active listening so that you're fully present with what you're doing. And you'll notice that the anxiety comes down when you do those things. And then just on the cognitive front, try to remember you've been navigating uncertainty your whole life. I mean, it's not like you have a choice, right? So for the moment we're born, there's all sorts of uncertainties that we have to contend to. And we learn our confidence by kind of leaning into these uncertainties and figuring out how much of the distress it causes us we can tolerate. And then we get better and better at it as life goes on. So COVID-19 comes around and says, here's a massive dose of uncertainty for all of you. And it's not just uncertainty about one thing, it's uncertainty about all things. So you're going to see this big anxiety bump. That's okay. Just remember, you're being asked to do more of something that you're actually probably pretty good at, and you're used to doing it, and you probably don't give yourself enough credit for. If you ever drive anywhere, you're taking on a lot of uncertainty there, but you're so used to driving, your regular commute, that you don't really think about all the things that could go wrong. You're thinking about what's on the radio or the driving itself. And then another little trick here that I think is important. Actually, it's not a trick, but just really try to look to what's good now. The tendency here when you're anxious is to get very black and white. Threat, non-threat. COVID's a threat. I'm in a threatening state. Everything is threatening. Everything is bad. But the reality is COVID has had no impact on your favorite movie and the amazing performance that your favorite actor made in it. No impact on the quality of the music that you listen to, right? So look for those things in your life that haven't been affected by this pandemic and use them as part of your grounding strategy. I think that can be really helpful with anxiety in this surreal and challenging time. So a lot of people with anxiety-based conditions will say they feel like they're stuck in a loop, and that's exactly what's happening here. All of these conditions, and really all anxiety, involves this process of reinforcement. So basically the way the brain works is when you do something and it's reinforced, your brain goes, click, you should do that again. It either encourages you to repeat things or it inhibits you from repeating things based on whether or not they're reinforced. So with anxiety and OCD and related conditions, it starts with an unwanted experience, a thought, feeling, or sensation. So it could just be that what if thought, what if I lose my job, or what if the economy doesn't rebound, or what if I get sick? And then you have this natural response to it, this anxiety of like, I need to prepare for this somehow. I need to get away from this feeling somehow. And, naturally, you don't like feeling that way. So you seek out a behavior to avoid or suppress this distress. And in OCD, we would call that a compulsion. And maybe in other conditions, we might just refer to it as avoidance or reassurance or something like that. The problem is, of course, that sort of kind of works in the beginning, right? You feel anxious, and then you go online and it says, people like you aren't going to have this problem. You go, oh, that feels so much better. And the moment that relief happens, the reinforcement also happens. That relief is the reinforcement. We call this negative reinforcement because it's removing an unwanted experience. And your brain goes, click. Okay, so the unwanted experience was definitely intolerable. And we know this because we had to do something to get away from it. Avoidance, or whatever it is that you did to make the anxiety go away, was absolutely necessary. And hypervigilance was totally required because that thing was definitely threatening. Because you got to remember, your brain doesn't really have an opinion about all this. It's just watching your behavior. So if you're responding to something like it's threatening, it's always going to say, good job, that was completely rational. And then the next time you encounter it, you're going to feel very threatened. So what are some of these behaviors we want to look to that actually seem like a good idea at the time, but ultimately end up reinforcing your anxiety? So the first is excessive avoidance. So at the beginning of this talk, I used the metaphor of the example of somebody afraid of a dog versus somebody who's afraid to go outside because maybe there's a dog. And so if that person is refusing to go outside, that would be excessive avoidance. That's reinforcing their anxiety about being harmed. Repeated checking is a big one, especially now. I know we're all going on the worldometer 17 times a day to look at all the stats, or maybe that's just me, but definitely checking your email and checking the news, and similarly to things like checking to make sure the stove is off and the door is locked. Too much of this checking is sending the signal to your brain that you're not safe, you're not secure, and there's something you're missing and you need to go back again. Excessive safety behaviors. This is a tricky one in this time. So normally I would say going outside wearing a mask and gloves would be an excessive safety behavior, but right now that's pretty much what we're being asked to do. But it could be even more excessive than that, right? For example, you don't need to be wearing your mask in your car. So looking to those cues that you're sending your brain that you're in more danger than you really are. Reassurance seeking is a very big one. So this would be asking other people to tell you that your fear won't come true, right? In order to get your anxiety to come down. And a lot of this happens online. We reassurance seek with WebMD and Dr. Google and things like that. And it ends up backfiring in the end because every time you get reassurance, and let me be clear, you're entitled one reality check. It's not that you can't ask for help, but when it becomes repetitive, it starts to send the signal to your brain that you're not confident, you're not secure, and there's something you're missing. And that's anxiety producing. Rumination and worry are very hard to kind of catch and abandon, but so important. So ruminating basically means just going over the same thing in your head over and over and over again and trying to problem solve it as if solving it in your mind would somehow affect the outcome. And the trick is to just recognize when you're doing that and say, oh, that's ruminating. I don't need to do that right now. Let me return back to the present. And lastly, ritualistic behaviors. So not everybody does this. Certainly people with OCD are more likely to do this. So you're looking at behaviors that reduce anxiety that aren't directly tied to the anxiety itself. So it might be counting or repeating certain actions with the right thought or engaging in superstitious or ritualistic behaviors. So looking at the big picture of how we really overcome anxiety or learn to navigate a world with anxiety, we're looking at something called exposure and response prevention. So the treatment, so one second, I just want to make sure I didn't miss something here. My slides. No, I think they're just in a slightly different order. So exposure and response prevention. So basically putting yourself in situations where anxiety is likely to be present and then resisting the response, resisting escape from the anxiety. So you can teach your brain, okay, I can have this experience. So in the big picture, we want to lean into uncertainty when it arises. So to every what if question, it's unknown. Yes, that's disturbing. I don't know. It maybe not. Could be. And then not try to lock it down. And of course, practicing mindfulness. How does that feel in that experience where you're uncertain? Learning how to be better at being uncertain and understanding that the anxiety is just a temporary expression of the body. And then the response prevention part, right? We want to reduce avoidant behavior, excessively reassuring behavior, and those ritualistic behaviors, because they're all sending the signal to your brain that you really should be anxious and that there's a problem with being anxious. That if you don't do something about it, something bad's going to happen. Little picture wise, sometimes we still need to bring the anxiety down. So while I'm saying, of course, it's fine to experience anxiety, it's a natural part of the human experience. So when it's too high, we can't think clearly, it's hard to make decisions, and you don't win a prize for suffering the most. And sometimes you need to be able to take it down a notch in the short term. So 2 pretty straightforward exercises that you can do at any point that I wouldn't consider ritualistic or compulsive. They're just strategies for basically better navigating the anxiety and just taking it down a notch, would be paced breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. So I mentioned earlier that one of the symptoms, one of the ways anxiety presents itself is with this rapid breathing. And so paced breathing changes that ratio of oxygen to carbon dioxide in your brain and takes it from alert, alert, alert mode to, okay, we don't need to produce all these stress chemicals. We've got some time to figure this out. We can handle this. Progressive muscle relaxation just means methodically tensing and releasing the muscles from the top of your head all the way down to your feet, just one at a time, just addressing that muscle tension part of it. And again, sending the signal to your brain that you don't need to be in high alert. And you can do this without the tensing part as well. You can just do it as an imagination exercise where you just picture with every breath, the anxiety kind of draining from your body from head to toe. So why don't we try to practice this paced breathing right now? So it's really very simple. There's, if you go online, there's lots of different ways they say you should do it, 4 seconds of this and 4 seconds of that. It really doesn't matter, but the point is that you're bringing in a few seconds, you're holding it for a few seconds, and then you're exhaling a few more seconds than your inhale. And the way that you're breathing is diaphragmatic, meaning you really want to think of it as, how when you drink something through a straw, you're sort of pulling down your tongue and you're lowering the pressure and it's pulling in the liquid. So your diaphragm is this muscle down here, and you're sort of pulling that down and out, and that's pulling the air in. So you can simply just put your hand on your stomach and take a slow breath in through your nose. And then when we exhale, we're going to exhale through the mouth and make one of those cool, ocean breeze sounds, because that really helps to sell it. And again, this is the strategy that we're working with here, is we're trying to send the signal to the brain. It's okay, we got this. All right, so let's just practice this for a second. So close your eyes if you're more comfortable doing that, or you don't have to close your eyes. Put your hand on your belly, and you're going to breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. And hold it for a little bit, and then release. And then repeat. Hold and release. Let's do that again. And with each exhale, it can be really helpful to just, again, imagine that you're exhaling some of the tension, some of the junk, some of the intensity. And just with each breath in and each breath out, you're just kind of lowering the lights, essentially, on your anxiety. And you can practice that anywhere. And I would recommend throughout the day, see if you can notice that you're holding your breath. See if you can notice that you're tightening up, and then let it come out. My colleagues make fun of me because they sometimes hear me sighing, but actually it's just because I'm holding my breath around the office, and then I realize it and I go, ah. So I think we're ready for questions. So I'm going to switch this so I can start reading if any questions have come in. Okay, and now they're coming in. So first of all, thank you everybody for watching me breathe on you during lunch. I appreciate that during these tumultuous times. What is your suggestion for tips to use mindfulness strategies when ruminating? I love that question, because mindfulness strategies are really the only thing that work with ruminating. So the first thing is you need to understand what ruminating is, right? It's bringing up a thought for the purpose of getting more certain about it. And the problem is it doesn't work, right? You're never going to crack the code on the thing you're ruminating about. So the trick is to recognize where your mind is. A common misconception about mindfulness is that you're not supposed to be thinking. Thinking is fine. It's thinking and not knowing that you're thinking is the problem. So the moment you become aware, oh, I'm ruminating, you label it ruminating, and then you abandon it. And you can do that either by returning to a sensation in your body. That can be a helpful way to ground. Or you can direct your attention to whatever you were doing before you started ruminating. Presumably you were thinking about something, and then you became distracted by the rumination, and then you got lost in it. And then you realize, oh, my mind's over here. I'm going to bring my mind back to this. You might have to do that many, many times. And so it's very important that you not get irritated with yourself. You always want to celebrate the noticing, not criticize the ruminating. Question number 2, do I have any advice for managing self-doubt and my anxious inner critic? So I could absolutely do a whole talk on this, but it's definitely very, very useful to understand that the self-critic is a response in a way. Even though it's an unpleasant thing, it is a way to try to get more certain about something. You're having doubt about who you are or how you are or whether you've done the right thing. And we're all having that now. Did I do the exact right thing when I took my gloves off or my mask, or when I touched the mail and things like that. And then to sort of make sure that you're behaving right, you might have this tendency to criticize yourself for even finding yourself in an uncomfortable situation. And this reflects a confusion. You don't control your thoughts. You don't control your feelings. You don't control your sensations. You got limited control over your conditioning, meaning all the things that go into making you what you are. So to criticize yourself for showing up in this uncomfortable moment really doesn't make any sense. Self-compassion is a much more objective way of looking at it, which is to say, okay, I hear that self-critical voice. I'm doing the best I can in this moment. Many people have doubts. What would be helpful for me now? And you want to think about it in terms of, if I was talking to another person that I cared about, what would I offer them? What would be helpful for them? What would be helpful for me? Question number 3, I'm anxious about COVID. Will doing things like washing my hands more and staying indoors help or hurt my anxiety? That's a tough question. I would say, well, there's a couple of different parts to it. I can't make predictions about where your anxiety is going to go, obviously. The stay-at-home quarantine lifestyle may be inherently anxiety producing for you, or it may not. Some of it may just depend on who you're living with and what your lifestyle was like before this. Following the CDC guidelines to the best understanding that you have, and still allowing for some flexibility, right? If it was, so I wash my hands for 20 seconds. So what if it was 19 seconds? So do I wash them again? I would say no. I would say that's an area where you have to still practice living with some uncertainty. So washing your hands more isn't necessarily what's going to cause you more anxiety, but washing your hands excessively above and beyond the CDC or WHO guidelines, that's more likely to be causing you anxiety. So try to pay attention to the difference. There's still such a thing as excessive. I know there was a lot of blogs and stuff out there, people making jokes about how we all need to have OCD now. It's not true. That just represents a misunderstanding of OCD and anxiety disorders in general. So look for things that are excessive, even though we're all doing a little bit more. Could you share some health activities that help people cope with anxiety? Healthy activities. Yeah, so I referenced a few in terms of, the things you use to distract yourself. I recommend people really cultivate something that is rewarding. So you can watch TV, there's nothing wrong with that, but like seek out TV that actually encourages you to think in a positive or useful direction. And that's not going to be the same for everybody, right? So for me, I can watch a lot of horror movies and think, this is making my life a lot better. I feel good now, right? And for someone else, it's going to be a sitcom, and that's perfectly fine. Exercise is very important. And I can't overstate, I think, the importance of developing a good, simple, daily mindful meditation practice. I really think that's the most useful, because that's the most likely to teach you tools that you could apply to all of the questions that came in. So I'm getting the red light. It looks like we are out of time for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you all safety and good health.
Thank you so much for joining us today, John. We really appreciate it. We will not be here next Friday. We're taking a break for Memorial Day weekend, but we will be here on Friday, May 29th. We will be joined by Jeff Richardson, the Chief Operating Officer for Community Services at Shepherd Pratt, and we will be talking about mental health first aid. So we will see you then. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great weekend.